Welcome to Improve Your English Writing, video number 38, where I'll be discussing the question mark, and specifically the topics of the direct question, Rule 28, a short question within a sentence, which is Rule number 29, and a long question after an opening phrase, which is Rule number 30. So if you'd like to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you liked the video or think others will find it useful, please hit like and check out links to videos and books in the description, like a link to the companion volume here. So, rule number 28 is use a question mark after a direct question. So, some examples are what time do you leave work? And did Zoe see the recent survey results? So both of these sentences are asking a direct question. Therefore, you would put a question mark after the direct question. It's pretty much a universal truth. After statements, you put periods, or after a command, you put a period, and after a direct question, you put a question mark. So, a straightforward rule. And now to some of the finer nuances is use a question mark after a grammatically incomplete direct question that represents a complete question. So what does that mean? Let's just look at an example. The missing grammatical elements are understood from the context. So an example would be when will that assignment be finished? Question mark. In a day or two? Question mark. Here, in a day or two is a grammatically incomplete sentence, but represents a complete sentence, like when will that assignment be finished? Will it be finished in a day or two? That's probably what in a day or two represents. So effectively, the person has not written the portion which is understood. And they just wrote this. And since it represents a complete grammatical or a grammatically complete sentence, you put a question mark. The next example is probably a more common situation that you see. This grammatically incomplete question is, at the time of the accident, were you walking, jogging, running? So, don't be tempted to put commas between these and then finish it up at the end with a question mark, because this jogging here represents, at the time of the accident, were you walking? Question mark. Were you jogging? Question mark. Were you running? Question mark. So these are actually jogging and running are actually grammatically incomplete sentences that represent a complete sentence. Therefore, put a question mark after them. And notice the capitalization in these sentences. I probably should have put a bullet about that, but you want to capitalize because they represent a complete sentence, and we know we capitalize, the first word of a complete sentence. Haven't gotten to that rule, but we will cover it. So that is the finer point on the direct question. Let's move on to rule number 29, which is use a comma at the end of a sentence, or commas mid-sentence, to separate a short direct question. And what I mean by short is 3 or fewer words within a sentence. So it needs to be a short, direct question within a sentence. Place the question mark at the end of the sentence. So the short, direct question, especially in informal writing, may be grammatically incomplete. And then for some other situations, what do you do? But use dashes to separate a long mid-sentence question of 4 more words. Place a question mark before the closing dash. So the Rule 29 addresses short mid-sentence questions. You separate those with commas, and you put the question mark at the end. But if you have a long mid-sentence question, which just means 4 more words, then actually you separate it with dashes, and you put the question mark before the closing dash. We will get to some examples. And finally, just a nuance punctuation with an end of sentences. A period may separate a short and grammatically complete question at the end of a sentence. So here we talked about, mid-sentence, short mid-sentence, long mid-sentence, and then actually if it falls at the end and is grammatically complete, we can actually use a period. So let's look at some examples. A lot of times when we read these rules, sometimes it's a little fuzzy on how they're applied. So let's look at some examples and see how this works. So let's first go for the short mid-sentence examples. Is Mr. Smith had leg surgery, didn't he, before 2015? So this didn't he is a short mid-sentence question. 3 or fewer words, we have 2. And that means we would separate it, per the rule, we'd separate it with commas, and we'd put the question mark at the end, which is exactly what we did. So the short mid-sentence, you separate it with commas, and you put a question mark at the end. So now let's look at the end of a sentence example, which I know I covered at the end of the last slide, but I decided to put it second tier for examples. Mr. Smith had leg surgery before 2015, right? So if you're ever wondering how to punctuate that sort of right or correct, we could say Mr. Smith had leg surgery before 2015, correct? Well, it'd be the same thing. It'd be a short, this is a short sentence or short question at the end of a sentence, and we separate it with a comma and put a question mark at the end. And now here's another example is you're traveling to Texas. Is that correct? So once again, we have a short question at the end of a sentence. We separate it with a comma and end the sentence with a question mark. But we do have the choice here because this is that correct, is actually a grammatically complete sentence. So we actually have the option of writing it with a period or putting a period here and treating this as just really you have a statement and a question. So how would you end a a statement or sentence of a statement? You would use a period and then you just use a question mark because this is a question. It's grammatically complete. It's a direct question, so you just use a question mark. So you actually have an option here when you have a short end of sentence question, 3 or fewer words that is grammatically complete is you can use a comma or you can use a period. Most of the time, probably most of the situation you're going to be punctuating is this word here is going to be like a single word like right or correct. So let's get to the long mid-sentence. So incorrect would be this because you're thinking, oh, it's a mid-sentence question. Therefore, it's just commas and a question mark at the end. The couple tried, did they not try their best to find the lost dog? This is incorrect because the mid-sentence question is 4 or more words. So if it was 3 or less, you could do it this way, but it's not. It's 4 or more. So you have to do it this way. The couple tried, dash, did they not try their best? Question mark, dash, to find the lost dog. So this long mid-sentence question is separated with dashes, and the question mark comes before the final dash. Now let's move on to the next rule. Rule number 30 is use a comma to separate a long question of 4 more words. Notice how it's long and short are still 3. The difference between long and short is 3 and 4 words, right? So short would, if it's a short question, it'd be 3 or less words. But here we have use a comma to separate a long question of 4 more words that follows an opening phrase. So here we have a long question follows an opening phrase, and you capitalize the first word of the question. Let's look at an example. Oh, sorry, one more comment. The opening phrase frequently, not always, ends with the verbs is, are, was, and were. So it's very frequent to see that situation where this phrase, this opening phrase, ends with one of these verbs. It doesn't have to, but it frequently does. So now let's look at some examples. Randall thought, what am I doing here? So here we have an opening phrase, and then you have a question, a long question, 4 more words. So what do you do? Well, you separate it with a comma, and you capitalize the first word of the question. Randall thought, what am I doing here? Another example is the question is, did you see the news report? So here we have an opening phrase, and like I said, it frequently ends with is, are, was, or were. Then you have a long question of 4 more words. So what do? You put a comma after the opening phrase, and then you capitalize the question. The question is, did you see the report? No, this is probably a situation that most people don't know how to punctuate, and it's that's how you punctuate it. You actually just separate the question or you put a comma after the opening phrase and capitalize the question. Here's a longer example, but still the same thing. Local government leaders debated. So you have an opening phrase, and then there's a question: how can we fund important services with limited funding? Which is actually a question. So you separate put a comma after the opening phrase, and you capitalize the question. So that's how you handle an opening phrase followed by a long question. So when the phrase follows the question, which is the reverse situation, so what happens when you have the question first and the phrase second? So when the phrase follows the question, the reverse situation, place a question mark after the question and do not capitalize the phrase. So let's look at some examples. Did you see the report? Is the question. So, did you see the report? This seems pretty natural, put a question mark here. What's unnatural is, I would say most people don't know if they should capitalize this or not, but that may indicate that it's the beginning of a new sentence, but you're not. This is all one thought. Remember, thought separator is for the period. Did you see the news report? Is the question. So just after the question mark, just put the phrase and no capitalization. How can we fund important services with limited funding? Question mark. Debated local government leaders. So once again, put a question mark after the question and do not capitalize the phrase. So another situation that arises is going back to phrase and then question is when a long question follows an independent clause, use a colon to separate the question. So before, remember the rule was always a phrase, but what happens when the introductory phrase is actually an independent clause? Well, in that case, you put a colon. Because remember, an independent clause always precedes a colon. So the question is this. So remember, if you just have the question is, you have to put a comma, but now putting this one word, you've actually made it an independent clause. The question is, colon, did you see the news report? So maybe, maybe think of it this way. If you're writing the question is, did you see the report, and you don't really like the look of the comma with the capitalized letter, well, if you just put put the one word and make it an independent clause, you can put the colon and then capitalize it. People may like the look of this better, but this is how you capitalize an independent clause followed by a question. The question is this, colon, did you see the news report? And local government leaders debated the controversial topic, which is I've just added a few words here to make this phrase a independent clause. Then I can put a colon here, and then I can put the question, capitalize the question, how to fund important services with limited funding. So that is it for this video. If you want to get notifications for the series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, please hit like and check out links to books and videos in the description. Thank you.